This is Meet the Movie Press. It's March the 8th, 2019. On the show today, The Suicide Squad, Idris in, Willie's out, Spielberg on Netflix, and Captain Marvel's box office, plus so much more. Stay tuned. We'll do it live!
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Meet the Movie Press.
This is Meet the Movie Press. Hello, it is March the 8th, 2019. My name is Simon Thompson. You can find me on social media at Showbiz Simon on Twitter and Instagram, or there is a Facebook page. This is Simon Thompson. A very crammed show today and a guest panelist because Scott is in South by Southwest. South by Southwest. So Dimitri is here as usual. Dimitri,
hey, folks.
Who are you? Where can we find you?
You can find me right here on Popcorn Talks, Meet the Movie Press, the best show about the biz.
Easy for you to say.
Not really.
James
And also on Popcorn Talks, Anatomy of a Movie, where later today we will be talking about Apollo 11, the sequel.
If you haven't, I was going to say, if you haven't seen the first 10 Apollos, will you get it?
You should.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Neil Torrance, welcome back on the show.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Always great to be back.
It's always great to have you back. Thank you.
Well, I miss Scott. I mean, you said I'm here because Scott is in South by Southwest. Was
South
that
by Southwest.
Were you voguing? Was that what that was?
That was
for voguing.
That's
yeah.
actually the most exercise I've had all week.
In a way, yeah. In a
God
while.
bless you.
But yeah, it's always great to drop by when I'm in town.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for passing through Los Angeles. Okay, let's talk about
By the way, at Neil Turret's on Twitter and number 6word reviews on Instagram.
Yeah, also, and you've got another podcast you do as well, right?
I do, yes. A podcast called Unduly Noted with my friend Ryan Beeman. Mm-hmm. And we've been on a hiatus because of various personal things. Ryan has relocated to Austin, Texas.
What?
From Los Angeles. But we will be back up and running probably next week.
Austin, Texas is great, by the way.
Is he at South by Southwest?
He is not at South by Southwest. He went to college there and just got he got a job. So
Kirby's Pancakes.
And
I don't think he works at Kirby's.
the best fajitas I've ever had in my life are at Enchiladas y Mas.
Some of the best barbecue I've ever had was at Austin last year.
Yeah.
My mic sounds a little bit thin. I sound like I appear to be in a toilet. I don't know if that's
You could
anyone
stand to
else's
be a bit
experience.
thinner, my friend.
I've always said you have a
That is
potty
true.
mouth.
And how do you think I got ahead in Hollywood? Being in the toilets. I'm kidding. That's not true. Okay, let's. People in the chat already. Good morning to Harris. First! Well done. Yes, Harris, you are first. Bob B has made made a comment about Idris Elba being like the black Josh Brolin. I don't actually know what you mean like that.
I don't know what that
Idris Elba
means.
Is black, but I don't think he's anything like Josh Brolin. I would like you to explain that comment, please, because I'm a bit like, no. Bob B saying they're being more creative with their stories, runtimes, casting, and overall production teams. I love that superhero movies are evolving. I think they are evolving. We're going to talk about that on the show. Actually, in our first story of the week, Suicide Squad 2 has hired Idris Elba to replace Will Smith as Deadshot, and new characters might appear. First of all, let's talk about Idris replacing Big Willie style Smith, because this broke actually not long after the show, a couple of days after the show last week when we've been talking about the Suicide Squad 2. Okay, so the recasting, what do you guys think? Last week we knew that Will was out.
Right.
We didn't know that Idris was in.
My first thought was, wow, that's really interesting, and I'm all in. Like, all in. I think it's great for both parties. I think it's great for James Gunn, for Suicide Squad, for Idris, and it's gonna be different. Yeah. And I think it's look, I'm not dissing Will Smith, but I think bringing him on board, now it seems like, hey, we're taking this serious. We're not putting a no-name in there. Idris has, a gravitas, so to speak. I think it's great.
Senor Nerd in the chat saying Will Smith to Idris Elba is like going from a Galaxy to an iPhone.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Sure.
Sure. I thought that one of the funny things I saw this week was some site put out that Don Cheadle was in talks.
Yeah,
and Don
then
Cheadle himself responded saying,
love
"I am."
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that. It was really funny.
We had a discussion on the show the other week about some of these sites that are cropped up who are coming out with some of the most ludicrous and completely not based. It's almost like, the site The Onion?
Right.
I'm
Where
familiar.
everything is
I
a
love
parody.
it.
It's
Yeah.
like some sites that are coming up these days are like The Onion, but they're deadly serious.
Yeah.
I really am absolutely. I was like, okay,
Well,
Great.
and also, what was it a couple weeks ago when that site said that Ryan
Johnson
is out,
Yeah.
and then they said one of the ways that they confirmed the story was talking to other journalists rather than talking to actual sources.
Yeah.
That's not how journalism works.
And I've seen a couple of stories recently where people have gone, rumors suggest. And I'm like, that's just someone tweeting or coming up with a thought and writing it down. That doesn't actually mean it's a thing. That's like me starting a WordPress site and going, I came to the show today on a unicorn. That doesn't actually mean that there are rumors that I came here today on a unicorn. It's really strange.
But I didn't see him show up. I don't know. How
I didn't know how we got here.
I parked it in the rechargeable unicorn station around the corner.
Very nice.
That's forward thinking.
Just plug in the horn?
and energy renewing. I like that.
Nothing if not green.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Idris is a really good shout for this.
Good shot.
Simon, push your mic out. You're speaking on top of it, not into it. Okay, how's that? Is that okay? That's a lot better. Where the microphone bit is. So yeah.
Wow,
So
you
I
gained
sound
weight.
more like I just sound like I'm actually in the room, which is quite handy. I think Will Smith, to me, he was one of the weak points in Suicide Squad. I mean, there are a lot of weak points in Suicide Squad.
Yeah, how did you narrow it down?
He just wasn't. He didn't feel quite right for that. I think Idris Elba is really going to bring a weightiness and I think a thickness and a richness to the character that I think we simply, for some reason, didn't get with Will. Now, I don't know whether that was the way the character was drawn or whether that was the way that that he played it. I don't know, but it just didn't sit right for me. So I really welcome Idris. Also, I mentioned there are going to be new characters which might appear. Again, this has come from online this week. I actually quite like these, even though they don't sound like real supervillains. One of them is Ratcatcher, which is apparently going to be gender swapped and played by a woman. Outrage! A super
Fanboys rise up and complain.
I'm sure there'll be something about that. A super criminal and one of Batman's many enemies who can communicate with rats. I assume going to be based in Washington. King Shark, a supervillain and humanoid shark whose father is believed to be a so-called shark god. Can you imagine how much shit King Shark got in the playground at school? It's like, oh yeah, your dad's a so-called shark god, is he?
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. Polka Dot Man, a.k.a. Mr. Polka Dot, because you need more than one polka dot name. Supervillain who,
Loves
like
polka music.
Ratcatcher, is a sworn enemy of Batman and grows multicolored polka dots on his body that can turn into fireballs and other weapons. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty cool.
Wait.
I mean, as it belies the name, it's cooler than his powers are cooler than his name.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'd rather
What
have
are you on
Polka
that?
Man.
Yeah, something.
Oh my God,
Klezmer.
Polka Man would be
Call him-
amazing.
Call him Klezmer.
Yeah.
That's
Klezmer Man.
Just Klezmer.
Klezmer Man.
Klezmer sounds at least somewhat devious and deviant, and there's an evilness to Klezmer. Who was
Sure.
the supervillain Klezmer?
Or we could call him Klezmerman from the New Hampshire Klezmermans.
Yes.
Oh my God, are you Brian Klezmerman's
Well,
son?
it was nice to be by, boys. I'll see you next time I'm in
So
town.
glad you stopped by.
I keep saying that so many of the superheroes, they're actually Jewish. It's like Aquaman. Oh, you're Jakob Aquaman.
Well, there's the great bit is like, why is his name Spider-Man? Why is it called Spider-Man? And
Spider-Man.
well, it's not. Why isn't it Spider-Man? Well, it's not his
Spiderman.
name. It's not Phil Spider-Man.
Yeah. Postman. But also Peacemaker, a.k.a. Christopher Smith, who's an agent of peace whose motives are driven by an extremist form of pacifism, which makes him love peace so much that he
He'll
would kill for it.
Peacemaker has actually been around for a long time.
I was not familiar with that villain.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Well, he's not always a villain, though.
Okay.
As I remember it, Peacemaker was actually one of the Charlton heroes, along with Blue Beetle and The Question and Captain Atom.
Yeah.
And Nightshade, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, and if somebody is going to come in the chat room and correct me, then you know. But there is a character like that from the Charlton universe.
Okay.
They've turned him into a villain over the years because as times have changed, the idea of killing someone for peace is not as socially acceptable as perhaps it maybe used to be.
Well, apparently that's also the character that we know that
Like
obviously
blackface, for instance.
Yeah, we also know that James Gunn is going to be directing,
Right.
And apparently Dave Bautista is linked to that role because obviously Dave has said that after Guardians of the Galaxy, he really wants to go with James.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that. It'll be pretty good. People in the chat. Good morning to a few people who are joining us on a rare occasion, which is lovely. Miguel Angel Gomez. Hey, Miguel. Saying, morning, guys. I would love to see time pass in Suicide Squad so they could explain why does Deadshot look older. Good point, actually. Although, when they did Iron Man and they swapped over... Howard for Cheadle.
Yeah,
they didn't explain that. It was just like different guys. So maybe
like
they will, and maybe they
Bewitched.
won't.
I don't think. Yeah, I think that who cares? I'm with the Greek guy.
Miguel. Okay, Dimitri. Yeah.
I knew his name.
Whoppa.
No, it's an inside joke from before we went on the air, folks. I don't care about that stuff. It's like, okay, it's the reality of Hollywood, and it's whether you're recasting on TV or movies. They don't address when they have a new James Bond.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Yeah, who cares?
That's true.
I think it's a good choice, and I think he's going to be working with James Gunn. I think we're going to see a great side to Idris because we already know that he can be cool and funny. He can be a villain. So I think that working with
he's actually been really funny in a bunch of stuff in the past.
Absolutely,
Yeah, really
sure.
good. But Film Nerd Jamie is actually kind of pointing to this as well. Elba is a wonderful actor, but for all the online press he gets, he's never lived up to it with his choices. He's not a star. And I think that's kind of chicken and egg because, no, he hasn't lived up to it with the choices, but I don't think some of the choices, the characters have been quite right. A really good example is the Star Trek movie that he did, which I enjoyed as a movie, but I think that character, I think he was undersold with that character. It wasn't well enough developed.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
When has he ever carried a movie or had the opportunity to be a movie star where he has
He
failed?
has not to
The
this
Dark
point.
Tower was supposed to. I mean,
Yeah.
he was
Yeah,
the
but
star.
I don't know. But he's not the. I don't think he's to blame for that. And that
No,
movie
he's
actually
not.
didn't it do? I mean, how badly did that movie flop?
It didn't do horrendously.
It didn't do horrendously.
It didn't do horrendously.
And
just got
it had
mauled.
enormous problems
Yeah.
preceding it.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was dropped in the
Tremendous.
dregs of summer.
Yeah.
There was also The Mountain Between Us with him and Kate Winslet,
Yeah.
which actually didn't do badly. Which I really like that movie.
Yeah, people sometimes think that movies do badly if they don't make a stack of money, but also it's all relative to how much they cost to
Exactly
make,
right.
market, and
Yeah.
distribute as well. So some really interesting stuff on there. Zeno House saying, I think there'll be a few more characters added to the lineup. I think so, but I think one of the problems for a lot of the superhero movies is the fact that they overstuff these movies, and this has been the problem with some Marvel movies. I'm thinking of the Spider-Man movies specifically, where you have
Go
two
back to the
or
Batman
three other
movies.
people. Yeah, the Batman movies.
There's
You
always
have-
too many villains.
Yeah, when you keep it to one or two, I think it's fine. But when you start to then add in an absolute, menagerie of villains,
Absolutely.
it's very difficult to serve. And that, for me, actually, even not with villains, but with heroes, even in the last Avengers movie, I found that was massively overstuffed. And a lot of the characters, which are great characters, simply didn't have enough room to breathe. There wasn't enough stuff for everyone to do. So too many great characters kind of became furniture. And I think that's something of a cinema crime. But yeah, that's my opinion. So let's see what everyone else is happening before we move.
Did anybody correct me about Peacemaker? Anybody say
I don't think so.
No. Zeno is saying, Idris Elba is a fantastic backup. Senior Nerd saying, I hope this doesn't mean Will Smith is done with superhero/comic book films. Marvel should pick him, have a part for him in Black Panther 2 or Black Widow or the X-Men. Yeah, maybe.
Why?
I think potentially, but I mean, but only if the part is right. Not because I think Will Smith has done something really interesting in the last couple of years, where he was pretty much a tent pole movie star, and then his star kind of dwindled. And I think he's making movie choices that are not necessarily the biggest movies or the ones that are going to bring in the most movie, but are ones that are interesting for him. And I think Aladdin is probably an exception to the rule on that, and I think Bad Boys 3 is a continuation of something that he started. He's going back to that lit firework to kind of draw a line under it, really. But yeah, I would like to see him, if the part was right, I would like to see him in something like a Marvel movie. But don't just put him in Black Panther because he's black.
Right, that's crazy.
Put him in Black Panther because you've actually got a really good role for him to play, because they pretty much everybody in Black Panther, they had a reason for being on screen, and their characters were really nicely developed. Don't just put him in there because he's black. I think that would be underselling him again.
His star has been on the wane for quite a while.
Yeah.
And, the joke I was going to make is, will people still continue to consider him a movie star after Aladdin comes out and completely destroys his career entirely?
I think it'll go one of two ways, because I think people, irregardless of the box office, I think it'll either, and I think the same with,
Sorry,
Sorry, aluminum. And I think... I think with that and Bad Boys 3, I think we're going to see whether people are actually seeing him still as a movie star, or what the traction is and what the attraction is for Will Smith.
Yeah.
whether audiences, if a movie isn't particularly good, whether they cut him to slack or what do they do?
It was weird. Well, they cut him like
Because we have to hold all actors accountable for the choices and the roles that they do and how they do them.
and for the longest time, he was like summer box office.
He was July 4th.
Oh, yeah.
He was
He
Mr.
was-
July 4th for years. But he also...
Midas.
And then Wild Wild West, even though it did really well, kind of was.
Did it do well?
It
I don't
did okay.
remember it doing well. I
Yeah,
remember it being pretty bad. But the point is that,
bad movie.
look, the thing is that we talk about Idris's choices. Will Smith's choices over the last 5-6 years have left a lot to be desired.
Well, I think he's picked a lot. Well, non-franchise movies.
Yeah.
Pursuit of Happiness. What was the movie? He did a couple of years
£7?
ago. No,
But
just,
that was further
just 2
back.
years ago.
Concussion?
He did. Oh, well, he did
the one
Concussion.
that was the one with Edward Norton.
There was the one about
his
his
wife
daughter
died or something. Or,
yeah.
Which I heard was just terrible.
He's been playing a lot of non-tentpole kind of roles, which I
Yeah.
can't begrudge him for doing. Aladdin's like the first one he's done in a long
It
time,
is,
right?
yeah. And he's certainly not been running towards Bad Boys 3.
No, and I forgot about Concussion, which
Yeah.
did okay.
Did okay.
It's,
Oh, yeah, there was the... no, I've forgotten what it is now. I'll remember it now. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. So some interesting stuff. But I think we all agree that that Idris is a nice replacement
Absolutely.
for
I think
Will.
so.
Captain Marvel flying towards 130 million opening in North America this weekend, eyeing 350 million worldwide box office. Looking at Thursday, it's definitely giving the box office a lift. It earned a healthy 20.7 million from Thursday evening previews last night. It's the 5th largest preview gross of any MCU title. So that's okay. It's not stellar, but it's a really strong opening. On average, preview grosses account for about 30% of the opening day, so we're going to see where that is going to lead. And if we're looking at this is a projection from Box Office Mojo, which is only one. Some people are predicting a little higher, some a little lower. Captain Marvel looking at 155 million for its 3-day opening weekend. 3-day opening weekend. I think it's really going to be... I think it's going to be 150, maybe 155. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, 130 million, I think, is a little bit low.
It's really hard these days because forecasting and tracking has been miserable.
Yeah. And it's been off quite a lot.
Like a lot, like by 20 million plus. So 130, I could buy, but I'm leaning on the higher end. But tracking has been, again, they've been going on higher ends too, and they've been off by like 20. Look, if it's any indication from last night, the theater that I went to, they were pretty much sold out for their 7 o'clock shows and their like 10 o'clock shows.
Yeah.
We've talked about Captain Marvel. I think there's really good positive buzz, and 150 is very attainable for a domestic opening weekend. Domestic
I think so.
I think that there's positive buzz, and there's also the fact that women who are not necessarily often eager to go to a comic book movie, are eager to go see this. I think that you're going to get a lot. You're going to get a lot more cross-gender audience to a movie that you wouldn't normally get for, Ant-Man and the Wasp, say.
On that viewpoint, one thing that really impressed me with Captain Marvel was the fact that even though obviously it is a titular female character who is the lead in this, it wasn't as if the male roles were underwritten or stoogified.
No.
Everybody who was in this, there were some really good characters, male and female, including those B-level characters.
Yeah.
I think Rambo, who was Marvel's Captain Marvel's friend from Earth, she was really great, and she was a complementary character who actually had something to do.
Lashana Lynch.
Lashana Lynch, yeah.
She was fantastic.
Really, really good. And I was actually, for a lot of characters who are often those B-level characters in Marvel movies, it'd be nice if they came back and they did something in another movie, but I was very much like, I hope they put her in something like Endgame. I hope they become a team in the movies.
There wasn't, watching it, there weren't any throwaway characters.
No,
everybody
it was
had,
quite lean.
And it was really smartly, it was smart that way.
Yeah.
So between who villains were and who you're at, really good performances all around, and I really think that, to your point too, not only just women, I think girls, like little girls, are gonna totally go, and we've already seen from like the premiere that people have shown up dressed up as Captain Marvel. It's almost the Wonder Woman effect, which is fantastic.
Well, that was why Brie Larson took the part in the first place. Was because she understood that she was going to be able to influence millions of little girls.
And also, I'll be honest with you, I mean, we've talked a lot about female empowerment and diversity in the industry and representation.
Coming from three white guys.
But it is very much a case of, I know there are some people in some quarters who've said they felt a little bit alienated by this empowerment and this push for representation. However, as a movie, this doesn't alienate boys who want to go and see it. In the same way that Black Panther, which was very important to black audiences, African American audiences, it didn't alienate white viewers.
Right.
I think sometimes we look at these things as we make a division that simply isn't there. Right. I actually think there's a really, with my Captain Marvel, across the board of characters, male and female and non-earthly, I think there's everybody has an equal footing. Everybody has, a part in the game. I don't think it's as divisive, certainly as a finished product, as some might perceive it to be, having not seen it.
I'll go one step further. I think that anybody who complains that this is not inclusive or that they're alienated somehow by a female superhero needs to get a life and stop, and get out of their own little bubble, because, if you're a man and you're complaining about inclusivity, I'm sorry, you're not paying attention.
But and I never thought that way going to see Wonder Woman. Like, I understood what Wonder Woman stood for when it came out.
Sure.
I get it, and I'm really happy about it. But as a guy going in, it was really just a great movie to see. And I've grown up seeing women in power, like Sigourney Weaver and stuff. But seeing what Wonder Woman stood for and seeing how it empowered little girls, even more so than their moms and older people, this is what Captain Marvel has a wonderful opportunity to do and it builds this great team around her, much like the cast in Wonder Woman built a great team around her. And that's what one of the things I come out of, when I came out of Captain Marvel, I'm like, that was a really fun ride, and everybody stepped up to the plate. There was no throwaway characters, and everybody got along great. It's
funny.
Awesome.
It's funny how there is. I'm going to move on for this because I don't want to just keep talking about this topic every single week, even though it is an issue that continues to go around. What I have noticed recently is there's a lot of people who. There's a very vocal minority of people who have a problem with a female hero.
Those are the people I say get a life.
But they don't have a problem with a female villain.
Right.
Well, why do you think that is?
And I'm just like,
do we have to even explain why that is?
But even when the villain is like the one that's kind of like, the Cruella de Vil's of the world.
Right.
Nobody complains when they're the villain. And I'm like, come on. And
I don't want to say anything specific because I'm going to get myself into trouble. But I think that there is a a perceived persecution complex that a lot of these guys have that just I kind of makes me roll my eyes.
And that's on them. There are some there is a lot of male toxicity.
Yes, that's my point.
There is also a lot of female toxicity, which is a growing problem. But I think we can.
I think they're very different.
I understand this is a reaction to an action.
Yeah.
But it is also not helpful in the same way that male toxicity is not
But I'm
helpful.
also going to say the audience I saw.
Nobody wins.
The audience I watched the movie with last night was so diverse. Okay. We had adults, children, men, women, dates, families, all various ages. And let me tell you, like when you're watching a superhero movie like that, it was just great.
And do you know why? It's because the majority of people, Dimitri, don't care.
They don't.
The majority of people out there, outside of this film world bubble, they don't care.
They don't.
Which
They
is
just-
what we were
really
talking
don't
about
care.
before our breakfast. The same thing of like who knows and who cares about
Yeah.
the things that we know and care about.
We've got some feedback on the
Seriously,
chat. We're
yeah.
going to move on because we have a lot to get through today, and I don't want to sort of go over too much of old ground. But Film Nerd Jeremy saying, Marvel has hit such highs that a 130 million opening would foolishly be seen as disappointing. I think that is fair, but it is certainly not disappointing. A $130 million weekend is something that many studios would love to
Especially
have.
at this particular moment in time.
Especially at this moment in time. Harris saying there are lots of empty seats here in Sweden yesterday night, but will probably be full seats tonight. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, previews are not entirely indicative of what a Friday, Saturday, Sunday crowd is going to
No.
be, because a lot of people won't go out to a movie on a Thursday. That will be the hardcore must-see-it first crowd of the general public.
Right.
And we all
of
know,
which there's actually quite a minority.
and we all
Yeah.
know exactly that the studios consider their box office to be made or broken by the numbers in Sweden.
Yes.
It's in Europe. It's actually an interesting market. But Harris saying these mature males are giving CM a rotten review without even seeing it. What the fuck? Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Female heroes never bothered me, and I don't understand the uproar. Maybe because I have two older sisters, and I grew up on Aliens, Terminator, and T2 Tomb Raider games. Meteoroid. Yeah, Xeno, I think that's really a valid point here. But I think, to be honest with you, it's down to the individual.
Yeah.
It's not an all men thing. I don't give a fuck. I literally, I mean, in the nicest possible way, I'm very supportive of it, but I don't care.
I don't.
I
know
watch
what
it
they're
talking
like,
about.
like, I can't wait
Not
for
over each
Birds
other.
of Prey. Like Birds of Prey.
I'm very
can't
excited
wait
about that.
For.
Harlequin,
So,
very
yeah.
excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people who doesn't have a problem with it. I don't understand it.
But here's the thing, though, is that we are, relatively speaking, evolved people.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the fans aren't. They take all of this stuff. We take this seriously, but on a different levels from the way some of the fans do. And I
Yeah.
understand that. But at the same time, it's like with politics. You've got to get out of your own bubble. You've got to be able
Yeah.
to stick your head up out of your little hole in the ground, like the groundhog, and look around and see what else is out there. And I think not enough people do that. And that's
Yeah.
where the toxicity comes from.
Let's talk about another box office tracking that's coming in this week that's quite interesting, and then we'll move on to Steven Spielberg and Netflix. Us is likely to score up to 40 million plus opening weekend at the box office. I think that's a little low. I think that's a little low. I think we're going to see around 45 for that.
Well, the movie's about
not much improvement, but about 45, because a lot of people who have seen the trailers are very excited by the movie, even if they don't usually consume horror. There is something about this that I think, off the back of Get Out, obviously it's another Jordan Peele movie,
Right.
people are going to go, it's not usually my thing, but from my experience with his other movie, I think there's going to be something there for me. Dimitri.
How many weeks out are we from us? At this
2 weeks,
Is it
3
2
weeks?
weeks?
Is it
22
2
weeks,
weeks or 3
yeah,
weeks?
22nd.
So this
22nd,
was announced like this past week. So this
Yeah.
is tracking again.
Yeah.
Tracking will come out up to about 6 weeks prior to release of the movie. $40 million. I mean, you could be right, because we still have another week and a half of full-on push, full-on television ads, your billboards, everything is right now. They'll go all in.
Yeah.
So that weekend number between now and opening could rise. They could come the week of. Don't be surprised if you start hearing 45, 50 million.
Reviews will help
from
too.
tracking.
I
Yes,
think so.
Reviews will help
absolutely.
too. Yeah, because I'm sure there are a lot of people on the fence because the trailers are genuinely frightening. And I think that people, if they all of a sudden comes out and says the follow-up to Get Out is spectacular, people are going to say, all right, I might as well go see it.
But the trailers for Get Out were pretty. I mean, for a horror movie.
Yeah.
They marketed it as a horror movie. We got a great combination.
Yeah.
And look at the numbers.
And look at those numbers. So that's why I think that, yes, this looks. I mean, watching the Super Bowl ad, I had people over watching the Super Bowl who aren't horror fans, and they saw that Us trailer, and
Yeah,
they're like,
I think word of mouth is going to be strong.
Absolutely.
In
Yeah.
the same way that it was strong for things like Sixth Sense. I mean, partly because of the twist, but also people who didn't do
Wait, what
spooky
twist?
movies.
What twist?
Oh, spoiler. People who didn't do spooky movies will engage with that. I think there are certain franchises that has also happened with over the years. People who wouldn't consider themselves to be horror fans, but will engage with movies like this. One thing before we go on to the next thing, which I don't want to turn into a rant, but so we just need to meet it very carefully. Film nerd Jamie saying, yeah, the general public, going back to the issues around toxicity, the general public doesn't follow this stuff and rightfully doesn't care. They go see what they think looks good. Film nerd Jamie also, this all comes from both sides, and honestly, it is always best for the trolls to be ignored instead of engaged. No, I agree. It is not to sound like Donald Trump, but it is from both sides. Yeah. And I have noticed an increase in toxicity coming from a group that I'm trying to be supportive of, and I don't find that particularly healthy either. I think there is no need for, on either side, this really deep toxicity, because nobody wins. Nobody. All you get is people saying, I'm just going to tune it out. And that nobody benefits from that. Okay, let's move on to Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg, Netflix movies shouldn't qualify for Oscar nominations unless they play in theaters for a certain length of time. Now, we all have our opinions on this. Let's not turn this into a 4-hour Avengers movie of a Netflix debate. But first of all, I am going to give the floor to Dimitri. We're not going to talk over each other on this.
No.
Dimitri, please take the floor on this. Your thoughts on Steven Spielberg and Netflix?
You know my thoughts on this, and I think that there's a misconception. Steven Spielberg isn't saying that he has anything about streaming per se, but just a little bit of exhibition 101. Currently, there is already a protocol in place, right, for what is called the theatrical release window. What that is how long a movie stays in theaters prior to the studio releasing it on other platforms such as streaming on demand and the physical copy Blu-ray, which I still buy. And this is a suggestion. This is something that they've agreed upon. It's not a law. It's not a rule, but it's something that protects both sides. And for the theaters, the exhibitors, it protects them. It says that exclusively for 90 days or 3 months, a movie can play in a theater only. It's one of the main reasons, too, why piracy is such a huge deal, because piracy can cut into a theater and distributor or studio's profits.
Yep.
We don't like piracy. People lose money, and it's illegal. And this is why, that's one of the reasons why there's such a big fight for it. So I agree. Netflix, Ted Sarandos has said he wants to be a disruptor to this. And he has. He's taking his wrecking ball to try to disrupt the exhibitor experience, this protocol, so to speak, that's been in place. They have the option to try to negotiate with exhibitors, but about 60, almost 60% of the gross, is it? 40 to 50% of the gross of movies come from 3 large chains. That's AMC, Regal, and Cinemark theaters. Okay, that's a huge chunk of the gross for the domestic gross. They won't play the movie because Netflix isn't adhering to this 90-day window or even coming to a table to try to talk to them about this.
Yeah.
So on this, I agree with Steven Spielberg. I understand what he is saying. For him, making films for the movie-going experience and protecting that, I understand. And it should. Like, if the window needs to come down, which studios have been trying to do, because it's all about the monies, come to the table, Netflix. Don't be a disruptor. Like, so I get what Spielberg is going with, and I agree. And I happen to just agree with that in protecting the movie-going experience and not denying people the opportunity to see a movie at the theater.
I don't think the industry is denying anyone the opportunity. I think the thing is that I think both parties here, there has to be some wiggle room, and I think some parameters have to be set. But I think bottom line is, if a movie is worthy of being recognized for the art of making a film, it should be qualified on those criteria. Now, I also think that, yes, there are certain movies, like Roma, that I think benefit from being shown in movie theaters. But I think also, realistically, there are a lot of people who won't go and see it in theaters if it's even more of a mainstream movie, because they can see it at home. There will be some people who want to. Great example is Bird Box. And there are some people who won't go and pay to see a movie that they think is out of their wheelhouse, something like Roma, which is a black and white Spanish language with subtitles movie.
Right.
If they, perhaps slam down $15 for a movie and they get 10 minutes into it and they don't like it, they do the shit click maneuver. So they're not going to go, and it's out of their wheelhouse. It's not an environment perhaps like an art house movie theatre where they want to do it. However, so an object to that is to say, okay, well, let's put them in into multiplexes. But if you, and we've used the example of the Midwest, if you're Brian who owns a theatre in the Midwest, and realistically you're obligated to run a movie that people can get for free at home for 3 weeks in your movie theatre, realistically, you're not going to get enough arses on seats to make that commercially viable for you. When you could be, as a business, where ultimately they don't make a lot of money from the tickets, they make money from concessions, so you need bodies to come through the door to see these things. You then have to look at it from a business thing, which I can understand is another issue. There are so many pieces of this jigsaw that I think need to be considered.
I am so glad, though, that you brought up Bird Box, okay?
Yeah.
Netflix spent so much money on Roma. $50 million for the Academy campaign alone, right? We're not even talking about what they paid for just regular advertising when it hit that. When Christmas came around, did you hear at all about Roma? No. They spent 1/10 of the money on Bird Box, and that's all you heard about for at least 2 to 3 weeks.
Well,
Bird Box Challenge, Bird Box this.
But that's because...
But
they're completely different types of movies.
But here's the thing.
They're aimed at completely different audiences.
Which, again, is saying... They're not, those people aren't going to watch Roma. They released, quote unquote, the viewership numbers on Bird Box. We don't have anything on that on Roma. And again, if you're going to play theatrically, you should be transparent in showing your grosses, the locations that you're at, what your per screen average is all about. Like, this isn't being an old fart. This is like an institution that's been around forever and that has worked. And Netflix can choose to be part of that. There's no problem. And nobody would say no to Netflix coming in, especially with what's going on with studios right now. We could use a strong entity like Netflix. I'm all for a new studio to come in,
especially with Disney buying Fox.
Oh yeah, well that's what I was getting to.
I mean, it's a little bit about being an old fart. It's a little bit about being an old fart. And by the way, just to say, when Simon went to you and said, "Let's not talk over each other," I so badly, as you were talking, wanted to just start talking over you.
I know. That's why you're doing it now. You're literally doing it now. You're doing it now. What did I say don't do?
I can't help it. It's just a comedy opportunity.
Neil, you have the floor.
Look, I think what it comes down to is that I agree with most of what you're saying here. I think that the fundamental difference is that the thing is what we were talking about before we went on the air is that you think that a company that's going to put a Cuarón film out like Roma in theaters, if it weren't a Netflix film, the argument that I made was without Netflix behind it. If say A24 releases that movie, then we're looking at it's going to do the same business and have the same reaction as something like Cold War had, the Polish film, which played for several months at art house theaters. It would play at art house theaters, and certain places around the country wouldn't necessarily get it until it came to home video, because that's what happens. But there are, you mentioned Cinemark before. Cinemark might show certain films, but in Portland, Maine, where I grew up, they're not showing Roma. It was showing at the IFC Theater in New York, and that's a Netflix thing. I understand, but the point is that it's not you can't make a grand sweeping generalization about which films will end up where, especially when we're talking about something the size and scope.
And I think ultimately, if any studio thought it was going to be commercially viable to own and release themselves widely in movie theaters, they would have outbid Netflix.
100%.
And we're not talking widely. I mean, Roma is not a wide release, but don't you think, again, leaving money on the table, don't you think that Roma would have played much better at either Lincoln Square or Union Square or the Empire?
100%.
Again, studios want to make money, right?
Right.
So had they played by the rules, they could have gotten an empire. And
But
they,
I disagree, because a 2-hour and 20-minute movie that's in black and white, completely in Spanish, is not going to make money at the box office on any kind of grand scale.
And if the argument is to
And a studio's not going to make that, not going to release that movie.
And if
I'm
the
sorry.
argument is to play in theatres for a certain length of time, you're saying, well, it would have been good at this theatre in New York or that theatre. It's what they're doing. So really, in order to meet halfway or to at least come closer together, is just to release it in more smaller theatres. But ultimately, if you are someone who owns a theatre and you know your local area and you know your local market, and you have a chance to book film A, which is a Netflix movie, or film B, which is a studio movie that you think more people's going to do, what are you going to choose to put in there? You're going to choose the one that is going to be more financially viable. Now, we saw in LA, the Vista.
Right.
I mean, I went to a screening that was hardly there, but I know that many of those screenings were absolutely packed and it ran for weeks. So I think there really has to be some sort of movement from both sides. But I certainly don't think the argument about Netflix is going to kill theatre, theatre distribution, and it's going to kill people going to movies, because people will always go to the movies, and we've had that argument presented with Laserdisc, with VHS, with video,
listen,
with television.
Listen, but I wrote an article about how people who stream.
He wrote an
I
article.
did. I was published in Theater World
on
about,
paper?
Yeah.
Wow.
Give it to you.
Oh my God, the talkies!
I did.
They're coming to a town near me!
They are. No, but I'm just saying.
No, let's hear Dimitri
I
out.
wrote an article that basically said that everybody streams. I have Netflix.
I have
I'm sure
Netflix.
you do
I have
too.
Amazon, I have Hulu.
Right? You still go to the movies,
Yeah.
right? This is not about streaming, folks. This isn't about how you're getting your content.
I don't think
This
that's
really
what
is
I don't
about-
think that's what we're arguing.
But then
But
it's also
it-
not about distribution. It's about the quality of film, whether it qualifies. I think if you start putting constraints on something, as in where it can be shown, how widely it should be shown, then you open the door for other constraints to be on, where it's like level of distribution. I mean, there are many movies which don't have a very wide release. I mean, The Wife wasn't exactly a wide release. Can You Forgive Me wasn't exactly a wide release.
I've been here. I was here 3 months ago, and we had a version of this conversation 3 months ago.
Yeah.
The last time I was here, and you and I had a
Yeah.
very similar back and forth
Yeah.
about this.
We
And
did.
we got sidetracked because it was not it was the beginning of this
Right.
whole thing. But the truth is that I think the argument that I always make is that by establishing certain rules, kind of piggybacking on what you just said, Simon, is that you are then the eligibility is 1 week in Los Angeles and New York. Right. So independent film is affected directly by this. What you're saying is Netflix needs to play by the rules, like, say, Amazon. Amazon Studios absolutely
said.
plays by the rules.
Absolutely.
And if Netflix decided to do that, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And we're only
So we
going
are
to
in
see,
agreement about that.
and the next topic that we're going to go on to is
Amazon?
another example. No, is another example of why we're actually not going to see less of what Netflix are doing. We're going to see more of what Netflix are doing.
Yeah.
With the growth of things like Disney Plus, and obviously
Right.
Amazon are really finding their feet now.
And Warner
They
eventually
are.
is going to have its own streaming.
And one of them,
They're
yeah.
working on it.
But the thing is, I think there is going to have to be some movement with some of these movies are going to be one because Disney's Disney, and they're going to want to have some of these movies available on the big screen for a certain amount of time because they want to make these movies an event. And some movies should. Roma is a Netflix movie. To me, having seen it, you should see that movie to get the full effect on a big screen.
100%.
In a movie experience. Realistically, people are going to see it in their homes with their shitty TVs and their sweatpants, or on a phone on a bus.
Which is interesting because
Realistically.
and this is one of the reasons
Or a
but
seat plane, or something like that.
one of the reasons why I think
Plain
that
seat.
Roma didn't win Best Picture.
Yeah.
There are several reasons, but one of them
It wasn't
is,
the best picture?
Well, neither was Green Book. But
No.
I mean, how often does that actually happen where the Best Picture actually wins Best Picture?
I know,
Separate
true.
conversation.
Yeah.
My point is
Coming up next.
My point is that people who paid $15 to see it, even if they're bored 10 minutes in, they've paid the $15, so they're going to stay the entire 2 hours and 20 minutes. If you're sitting at home and you're bored 10 minutes in, like my parents, for instance, it took them 4 tries to get through the first hour.
Right.
So, if you're sitting at home, you may not last all the way through the 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Now, I've been reading the comments, and it's interesting because
Are they being mean to me?
theaters? No. Theaters do a monthly series called TCM Presents. Yes,
do.
but that's repertoire. These are movies that have already come out. These are classics. These are like these are special events at movie theaters. They're not theatrical release. Somebody also said that where is it? Right, Netflix movies are like Fathom events. Fathom releases. Okay, but again, those are non-theatrical, like one night only. They'll show Doctor Who. They're just like for a low box office period, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, they'll bring something in. They'll bring like a special event movie in.
They Shall Not Grow Old was a Fathom event to start. And by the way, the word you were looking for was repertory, not repertoire.
Yeah, that's. Thank you very much. For my repertoire, but no,
that's right. That repertory should be in your repertoire.
Right. That was a rap battle, I think.
Oi.
Took us.
So glad you're back.
Took us.
I have so much fun when I come here.
Anyways, I really, and again, listen, I would have had no problem with Roma being nominated for so many things, but again, when audiences are denied and we don't know what the box office is, we don't get theater counts or location counts. These are all part of, again, these are just, it's protocol.
The so-called social contract.
But also those are...
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, but that shouldn't stop people being nominated. If you make a movie that meets the criteria of being a film that is worthy of, as the art of cinema, being recognized for those arts. None of the other movies are judged by screen average, bums on seats, distribution model, etc., etc. So I think But
they adhere by those rules. That's all I'm saying.
But those are not the rules the Academy puts in place, and this is about them being nominated for an Oscar.
Right.
These are not things the Academy put in place as a prerequisite for being nominated for an Oscar.
and
if you do, then you have to apply constraints and limits to all other things. And if it's a case of, finances, distribution, amount of screens, you then also preclude other films potentially from being considered for an Oscar too.
Which is what I was saying. And I think that ultimately what we all care about and what will solve the problem is that there is perceived to be something of an arbitrary nature to all of this.
True.
And if you remove the arbitrariness of the situation, you pull that out and make everything concrete, make the rules the same for everybody across the board.
Yep.
So the disruption can't happen. Then it's over. Then the conversation is over.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that Spielberg just wants to bring this up about, because he didn't even
and it's worth bringing up.
Right. That's all.
We have to have a conversation about these
things. He wants to bring this up. And again, I'm not saying I'm not against change, but let's have the conversation first. And actually, Netflix should have a seat at the table to do this. They shouldn't say no.
Before we go on this, let's just say that also where Netflix really excels is these middle movies that a lot of people wouldn't go and see.
True.
But the thing is that when these middle movies are put into movie theaters, what do audiences choose? Above or below? They still struggle to be these middle movies. So simply
that's why they don't make them anymore.
Yeah. So simply putting them out there for these audiences when the audiences have already said, we have this opportunity right now and we reject this opportunity. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
It's not entirely true, though. Look what...
it's often the case, not entirely, not blanket, but often the case.
Look what A24 did with, what was that horror movie that we was it 2 summers ago? Last summer, what was the horror movie that A24 came out? Like, again... Hereditary. Yeah, if that movie...
I hated that movie.
Yeah, I didn't think it was right.
Love or hate it, that's a middle movie.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but it's different because it's a genre film, and that makes it different.
That's a difference.
Here's the thing,
okay,
you're no longer saying...
movie.
I've been saying for years in both print and on my own podcast and on this one.
You have a podcast?
It was mentioned earlier.
I
understand. I've said it here before, is that Hollywood is no longer making the kind of films that made us fall in love with the movies in the first place.
Wow.
And
That's a good idea.
And that middle range drama, for instance, is just it's becoming extinct. It's rare that it shows up, and if it does, it's only because some megastar is in it. Whereas, you can't use a Hereditary, something like in that category, because it's a horror film. So there's a built-in audience of people who are going to go see that movie. You're not seeing...
Well, you're not seeing romantic comedies. You know,
and if they are, they're small.
Right.
I mean, although Isn't It Romantic, I liked quite a bit. I thought that was a fun spoof of romantic comedy.
So anyway, this is something this is gonna rage on and on and on. It's something I'm sure we're gonna come back
when
to.
is
But
this
ultimately,
do we know when this governor's meeting is? Because that should be covered nationally. I think, on TV for us.
We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think this debate is going to rage on.
I agree.
I don't think Netflix is going to budge much the other way, and I don't think theaters are going to give much ground on this. But when you start putting in parameters, I think the whole thing gets a bit more difficult. And I think ultimately the Oscars, which are about the art of cinema and rewarding the art of cinema, it should be about the award of cinema. I entirely understand Steven Spielberg's viewpoint. But it's not about, it's about when we're looking for an industry where we're looking for inclusion and representation, I think to then start putting down parameters which are basically don't affect the movie. They don't affect the quality of the movie or the filmmaking, because often in many cases they're already done. It's just about who bought them, I think is different. Okay, we need to move on.
It's a complicated issue.
Disney Plus, there is no simple answer to this. Disney Plus are going to house the entire Disney motion picture library, including things from the Disney Vault this week.
That's awesome.
This is great news, but again, this is about the evolution of these streaming platforms. And I'm sure that over the next 5 years, we're going to be seeing some more come through. I don't think this is going to be the end of the growth of streaming. I think it's we're going to see people are going to start picking where they spend their money. But I mean, I've got Hulu at the moment. I went through Hulu yesterday. There were 2 things that I found that I actually wanted to watch, and I was like, actually, I'm going to end my Hulu subscription because there wasn't enough.
I'm about to start watching the entire series of Letterkenny.
But I think people are going to start doing that. They're going to have it for a period and then jump off. And then when it gets more stuff that they want to watch, they're going to jump back on. But Disney has an absolute mine of stuff that you cannot get on TV or streaming or even hard format media these days.
It's hard. The Disney Movie Club, which I'm a part of, you can get some of their hard format of catalog titles that no longer exist. Movies like one of my favorites, The Island at the Top of the World, Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Yeah.
Even The Black Hole is not available on a current Blu-ray, right?
Will we get Song of the South?
I don't think that one's going to be rearing its head again. Although, to be honest with you, I would be really interested to see
if it's the entire catalog.
Because I haven't seen that since I was a child, and I know it's basically completely inappropriate. But
basically,
there are other movies that are also horribly inappropriate from the 80s. So considerably after Soul Man, The Toy, I often reference regularly.
The Toy,
and and it's so I think actually to revisit that, I think would be quite interesting to look at it in a new context. Now, I'm obviously not saying that you should put racist stuff on a Disney Plus platform. However, it's a film that I would like to
I think that there's 2 things. One, does The Toy qualify as an actual hate crime? I don't know.
Just in quality of filmmaking or race alone?
Either way. I mean, and its treatment of Richard Pryor.
It's aged horribly.
It was bad at the time. Look, the other thing, too, is I think that what we lose when we remove the content from viewing is we lose something of American history, of cinematic history, of how we perceive race, how we have perceived race through the years. And I think these are, in their way, important historical documents. Yeah. I think that there's certainly, as a Jewish man, that there are things out there that are anti-Semitic.
Wait, is Jewish Man Marvel or DC?
That's an Image title. It's an independent. It's an independent. Yeah, because we have our own little. But I think that
Chutzpah Squad.
Hey, you got the ch right this time.
Chutzpah.
You say tukus,
but chutzpah.
Nice, I like it.
What is this, Mr. Gas?
But there's stuff out there that's not terribly flattering in one form or another. There's Spike Lee has danced around the idea of some anti-Semitic tropes in some of his movies.
Yeah.
But nobody's talking about banning those. And I'm not saying that there's anything good necessarily about these films other than the historical document that they provide.
Birth of a Nation
is a movie that I watched
for the first time about a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible piece of cinema and documenting a horrible
Well, it's
place
a
in
brilliant
time.
piece of cinema. It's
But-
a horrible document of
Yeah.
the time and a horrible treatment of an entire race of
But
people.
I'd never seen it, and I watched it as an education piece.
That's my point. That's exactly
Not
my
to
point.
how do
Yeah.
I become a member of the Ku Klux Klan?
Yeah.
No, but it was very much, it was very much a looking at a historic piece.
That's
of
exactly my
cinema.
point.
Yeah.
Something like Song of the South is not going to I'm not saying there's anything redeeming about it other than to place it in a historical context.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think this Disney Plus, so far, everything that they've said, especially the catalog, the movie catalog, if it's going to include some of these classics that have been unavailable, and I'm not talking like Little Mermaid and all these you can get on
The ones they
Blu-ray,
keep re-releasing
but some of
and-
these
yeah.
live action movies, like, going back to the Apple Dumpling Gang, The Computer Who Wore Tennis Shoes, The Strongest Man in the World, all of these movies.
Two
would
Girls,
be
One
great.
Cup. That wasn't Disney. Sorry.
I knew you were going to say that. I wish. Damn it. If I thought it like 2 seconds ahead, I would have pointed and said, "Don't say 2 Girls, 1 Cup." Man, I knew that was coming. Sorry, continue.
Where do I go
That was
from
Fox
there?
anyway.
Jeez.
Where do I go from there?
Okay.
All I'm saying, I think that plus whatever content, like The Mandalorian, like whatever series that they're making.
Oh, the new stuff. Sure, of course.
And again, for what
Let's
we
flog
are,
that Star Wars horse.
for what we know the price point to be.
Yeah.
I think it's $9.99. They say it's going to be cheaper than Netflix.
Yeah.
That would be an incredible price point.
And
to
there'll be
get all
introductory
that.
periods as well. I mean, to be honest,
Sure.
like you say, I mean, there's so many, especially in the 80s and 90s, Disney really on Buena Vista and Hollywood Studios Entertainment, a lot of movies that I just don't think that they were appreciated, or some people have basically forgotten about. Some really great comedies.
So will it include
Hello Again,
Outrageous Fortune?
Outrageous
Down and Out in
Fortune,
Beverly
yeah.
Hills. Yeah.
Some really great stuff that when we
Absolutely.
haven't seen pop up on other streaming platforms are actually quite hard to get on a really good quality hard format. And we don't see them running on cable and stuff like that anymore. I think I'm going to I might even ditch Netflix for a while because I struggle sometimes to find stuff on there that I either
You're not
don't
looking hard enough.
own
Then
or
you're not looking hard
it's a
enough.
horrible navigation system.
Well, but there's still
horrible
tons
navigation.
of great stuff there.
Yeah.
But I think I might rest it for a while and then maybe do Disney Plus when that comes on. But we don't have a launch date for Disney Plus. But we'll see. What
We
happens.
don't. But there is a launch day, I believe, for Criterion Channel.
Yes.
Yeah, that's April. I've
Right.
already signed up for it.
But again, like I would love that if I were able to get it either through my Xbox or my Blu-ray player. I
I
don't
want to
have
be able
anything.
to. Yeah, I want to be able to watch it on my Blu-ray player. There's going to be a way that we can do that. They can
Anyways.
do that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, also there's so many different ways to stream stuff these days. I think it's going to be very. And Disney, I think they'll be quite accessible.
I think so.
Sky Patterson, Meet the Movie Press, is doing an amazing job with his podcast on YouTube. Thank you so much. Keep up the
Thanks,
good work.
Sky.
We're not
That's-
just available on YouTube, by the way. We're also available on Spotify. We're available on Podcast One. We're available on Arrow.
I listen to it on iTunes.
iTunes is another one. We
When
had
I'm
some
not
issues
here, I
with
mean.
that last year,
Thank you.
but
And then when I am
it's
here, I
another
listen
way
to it
you can
twice.
get this podcast. So we are available in many, many ways. So if someone goes, I don't watch videos on YouTube, you can actually get us in your
Yeah,
ear
well,
in
fuck
various
you,
other ways.
man.
But also, I mean, have you seen us?
Non-YouTube watching
Look
guy.
at us. At least to cat videos, and nothing ever ends
Too
well that
good
way.
for us.
Sky Patterson saying Captain Marvel will be another $1 billion hit for Disney.
Nope.
No, I don't think it'll make $1 billion. I'm happy to be proved wrong.
I think it'll top
but
out at 800.
I think it's going to be 8 to 900. But do we really need it at $1 billion?
Endgame will do $2 billion.
Scott saying, will Disney keep some things? No One Thing Song in the South locked up. Scott, something we were actually talking about on the show. Film nerd Jamie, the Simpsons producers say that they're going to pull the Michael Jackson episode from
They already have.
syndication circulation. Yeah, they already have, and future home video releases. No matter what your opinion on the allegations, a bullshit move. I mean, I kind of agree. I think they should. It's out there. We know it's out there. And even if I don't necessarily, we're not going to get into Michael Jackson today. But I think you can't pretend it doesn't exist. Scott Boswell, I saw the toy recently on a free TV. Weird. I think weird is certainly one
Weird
way.
is not the word I would
one
use,
way
but
to
okay,
describe it. But yeah, Sky Patterson, you guys are the best. Thank you. I really appreciate it. A really big part, and I was going to talk about this at the end, but as Sky has very conveniently brought this up, and I hope your job is going well, by the way, Sky. This show exists for one reason only. It doesn't exist for us to come along and shoot the shit every week as much as we enjoy doing that.
of Simon's ego.
No, I mean, does that need any help? I'm kidding. No, but we're not here just for shits and giggles. We're here because there are people that want to consume this show. They love movies. They love talking about movies, and we have different viewpoints to many other shows that are out there, and we talk about it in a slightly different way. And we really appreciate the fact that you guys engage with this. But really, in order for this to continue and to grow, and most importantly, to continue, we rely on you guys to actually spread the word. And it doesn't matter whether you've got 24 followers on Twitter or whatever,
Hey, that's me.
or 25,000.
25 now.
Really, the success and the future of the show, whatever we put into it, really depends on you. And we really appreciate you guys, what you currently do and anything else you can do to boost the coverage that this show gets. We really appreciate it. If you like it, if there are things about it that you like, if there are particular things in the show we talk about that you think are great, do tell other people about this. It's lovely that we have a little club and it's really nice. It's a nice little family and we don't always have to agree. That's what families are about. But really, it's not just about the conversation we have each other. It's about inviting other people to be part of that conversation. And really, that is where you guys come in. So if you like the show and you like what we do, yes, subscribing and liking and just stuff, and liking a tweet is great. But retweet and tell people about the show. And don't just do it on a Friday. Do it throughout the week. We really appreciate it. And we need that to continue to survive.
And I'm proud to be, I'm probably the bastard stepson of the family. Now I'm proud to be part of the family. And seeing all these people who are online, they're taking their time. And people who comment and write, I always appreciate that they take the time to write.
Yep.
I mean, which is amazing.
Sorry.
No, you're right. Simon, it's been a great family. And we don't always, this panel, whoever's on the panel, we don't always agree.
If we did, it would be really boring.
It would be boring.
It would
be
be.
boring. I mean, well, look, I first thing I want to say is to our listeners, their listeners, they really appreciate you. I'm only here 4 or 5 times a year. I think you're fine. But I can honestly say, look, I mean, whenever I'm coming into town, one of the first things I do is reach out to Simon and say, can I come on the show? Because of how much fun it is. Right. Because, I mean, we always have a good time when we're here and we talk about interesting stuff. And what I find engaging about the show and why I listen to it when I'm not here is because everybody who's here cares so much about what we're talking about, what we're discussing, that it comes out in the conversation. And I think people respond to that. I know I do as an audience member on weeks that I'm not here.
Well, Film that Jamie is saying in the chat, if you're able to watch this, not everybody is because, we've all got our own shit to do and we appreciate that. But when people do take part in the chat, that's also really helpful as well. Film that Jamie is a prime example of this. I'm frustrated to see this show not killing it with legit, thoughtful commentary on the business. So many bullshit daily news shows run by people who do not know what they're talking about. There's Meet the Movie Press, and then there's every other online movie news show.
That's true.
Now, this is, and we really appreciate that. Tell other people.
Yeah.
Tell other people if you like this show. And I guarantee that not everybody that you tell will like this show. Some will think we're assholes and we're talking shit.
I think we're assholes and I'm here.
But you're kind of like an adopted asshole. But
I'm surrounded by assholes.
you know what it says?
Keep firing assholes.
If LA needs more things, it's definitely assholes. So we import you. No, but seriously, we do really, really appreciate the support that you guys give, men and women, whoever you are and whatever your tastes in film are, we really appreciate it. And when you appreciate us, that is wonderful. But really, if you want to help us, tell people about the show. If you want us to continue doing this, tell people about the show. We're part of the show. You're a bigger part of the show because if you weren't here, we wouldn't be here at all. So really,
we'd just be sitting in a diner talking about over eggs.
We can do as much as we can do, but really, without you and the work that you guys do, evangelizing about the show, telling everybody on Twitter or Instagram or whatever about the show and how much you like it and why you like it. That's really where our success is going to lie. We can do anything in the studio every week. We can introduce features and whatever. But really, I mean, if nobody knows that we're doing it, it's kind of pointless. So thank you for what you're doing. If you could do more, we'd really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, tweet, retweet. If you have things that you would each week like us to talk about on the show, don't just save it for the chat when we're live on air on a Friday. Tweet at Meet Movie Press or myself or Dimitri or Scott or any other panelists that we have on the show and tell us what you'd like us to talk about. And also, we would like to get some new faces on the show. So if you have a journalist that you would love to have on the show, we'd love to know about them. We really would. And we'd love to have them on because if they come with an audience as well, that helps us grow. So guys, Captain Marvel is going to be the big movie this week. I think pretty much everybody's going to see that.
Sure.
I know you haven't seen it. We've talked about this movie before.
Right, I'm seeing it on Sunday. I just haven't had time.
Yeah.
You seeing it at like IMAX? You should.
I'm seeing the
like
big screen at
Dolby.
68th Street in Manhattan.
Oh,
Nice.
nice.
But with
the
Cap-
biggest theater in the yeah.
But with Captain Marvel, are they showing Roma? But with the biggest, but with the biggest movie this week. Also, what I wanted
Nice
to do is
callback.
I want to set everybody a bit of homework this week for anybody that's listening to the show. Pick a movie that you've never seen before, and I want you to watch it. It might be on your pile, it might be in your Netflix queue, it might be on your Amazon Prime queue, the one that you've been watching. That's maybe a classic movie. It doesn't matter if it's a classic movie you've never seen before. Watch it and tweet at Movie Press this week and tell us about that movie, what it was, and what really stood out to you about this movie. That can be whether you thought it was brilliant. It can be whether you disagree with people who think it's brilliant. We want to hear what you think about it. But this week, your homework is watch a movie you've been meaning to watch and watch it and tell us about it. at
I'd like
the
to make
Movie
a
Press.
suggestion. If you're going to watch a
Boat
movie
trip
that you-
is not on the list.
What
We
did you
talked
say?
about this at breakfast this
trip?
morning.
Oh, yeah.
Cuba Gooding Jr.
If you have Amazon Prime and you're like romantic comedies
Yeah.
and you've never seen it, watch Two Ninas. Then you can talk about that one. That's my first movie.
Sweet.
I like the setup.
Dimitri, where can we find you? And
Well, right
Troy?
here at Popcorn Talks, Meet the Movie Press. At DMovies1701 is my Twitters. You can also find me on Popcorn Talk Network's Anatomy of the Movie, where my lovely co-host, Marissa Serafini, we break down movies extensively. And this week we are going to be talking about Apollo 11,
Which
spoiler,
is
I love.
amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing. Go see it. Also, counter programming. If you've already seen Captain Marvel or don't care, you're looking for something interesting, independent on the independent side. Go see Gloria Bell with Julianne Moore.
Fantastic. And where can we find you, by the way?
Again, at Neil Turitz. That's NeilTuritz. If you spell it Neal, you're dead to me. And also, you'll find somebody else because the person doesn't exist. But that's me on Twitter and my on Instagram. I am 6 word reviews, number 6 word reviews. And there's something there every day. I review movies in exactly 6 words. And starting, I believe, next week, Unduly Noted will return. And we're once a week, Ryan Beeman and I, talking about similar stuff. But we add in sports and other things.
And now
Duly noted. If you want to follow this show on Meet the Movie Press, it's Meet Movie Press on Twitter, and you can find me at Showbiz Simon on Instagram and Twitter. As always, thank you so much for taking part in the show. One final thing, someone's asking, did Simon, Dimitri, and Neil were part of the early screening of Shazam? It's too early. That burns. No, thank you, Warner Brothers. But we're going to be seeing it next week, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you like the show, like, subscribe, tell everybody about it, and we will see you back here next week. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of its owners or principals.